All right, our final speaker today, Aaron Lee. He's part marketing wizard, part growth strategist, and entirely dedicated to unlocking creativity. Over his 35-year career, he's founded and led Illuma. Did I say that correctly? All right. Illuma agency for 22 years, shaping successful brands for Disney, Aveda, Motorola, earning multiple Inc. 5000 and Best Places to Work awards along the way. Now, through 6Q, he's a strategic growth coach and CMO advisors, helping businesses ignite their potential. A proud 14-year member of EO Atlanta, a volunteer leader, Aaron's led at local, regional, and global levels. He's also a husband of 28 years to Lisa Lee and father of 3. So everybody please stand up and welcome and get ready to ask, what if, as he reignites your imagination.
I love getting to pick walk-on music. It's a lot of fun to do. I should think, like, what is the theme of this thing? So thank you all, and I want to thank our other 2 speakers because you set me up perfectly for my talk. And maybe Jason, you're the genius for stacking it all in that way. But thank you very much for doing it. So it was a really great job. So, I want to start by asking a question. What if you and everyone you knew was already a creative genius and we all just forgot how? So I want you to buckle up because the next 15 minutes are going to be a roller coaster journey through what it means to be creative and to develop a creative mindset. You ready?
Yeah.
I mean, are you actually ready?
Let's do it. Yes.
Okay, because we're getting started right now. So in front of you, you should find a piece of paper, a crayon, and 2 cards. What I'd like you to do in just a second is turn over one of those cards, and you will have a minute to draw whatever's on the back. I know this probably just triggered a lot of things in the room, feelings and thoughts and emotions, but we're gonna get through this. All right, ready? Go. You have 60 seconds. Plenty of time here. Nice, you're having some new thoughts and emotions once you read the card, that's okay. Keep going. About 30 more seconds. Plenty of time. Keep exploring. Alright, start putting some finishing touches on. About 15 more seconds. Some people with overachievers already done. And just about there. Wrap it up. Okay, crayons down, please. So I'm curious, what was your reaction to that exercise?
Yeah.
What feelings did you have? What did you say to yourself? Any quick reactions in the room?
The director was funny.
The director was funny? Okay, yeah, all right. Anything else? Any other feelings and thoughts about that?
It ain't gonna look good, but it'll be accurate.
All right, great.
Ain't gonna win any awards.
Make it happen. So, we get forced into situations where we have to be creative suddenly, right? And whatever shows up in our brain is what always shows up when we're in that kind of situation. It's our bias, it's our patterns, right? I'm curious, did anybody challenge the thoughts that you have when you first turned that card over and were asked to draw with a crayon at an EO event? Did you think about what came up for you, or did you just take what you had and you ran with it within whatever mindset you already had? So I want you to be thinking about that as we go through this talk. What are the automatic responses you have when you try to be creative? It's an insight into your whole mindset around creativity. Because we're all dealing with challenges. Jason spoke about this. We're all dealing with problems. Some of them are really big stuff, like how do I pivot my business? How do I, plan for a forum deep dive? How do I get closer to my kids? And there's also everyday stuff, like what are we having for dinner? All of these things are places where we can find ourselves stuck, dealing with problems, answering and trying to ask and answer questions of ourselves. Creativity is an opportunity to move through these things. So where are you feeling stuck right now? keep that in the background as you're going through this conversation and start mapping some of what we're talking about today onto that issue that you're dealing with. Because what if I said to you, creativity and creative thinking is the single most important skill you can acquire to help you move through and solve problems. In fact, the World Economic Forum recently released a meta-study that it did looking at the top 20 skills for human beings to be successful in the 21st century. Where do you think creative thinking landed? Number 2 on 20. 20th century was barely even on the radar. Our world is moving at a faster and faster pace, and creative thinking is a way that we can all unlock our problem-solving abilities to move through this fast-paced world. So many issues coming at us in so many different directions all the time. Creative thinking is a way to help move through this. But how do we do this? How do we get past this? Well, and why do I get to talk about this? Because I spent my entire life in this headspace. From doodling and drawing as a kid to professionalizing my skills and exploring it in many different aspects, right? Branding, digital, video, animation. Even now as a growth coach, I get to work with other companies to help them creatively solve their own issues and challenges. And I've been able to do it for many different companies and many different brands around the world, including even working with Disney at the Epcot Center. I was creative director for 3 different interactive exhibits in my 20s. So I've had a lot of lifetime to think about what it means to be creative and to spend time in that headspace. But being creative isn't just about being artistic. And I think that's one of the misconceptions often people have about creativity is that they think it's the same thing as being artistic. And I'm proposing that creativity helps you solve much bigger problems in life. So it's 2011, I had just gotten into yoga, gotten out of Accelerator, and I found myself here on the last day of a cruise in Positano, Italy. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Positano, Italy, but I got there and I had no idea what to expect, and I fell in love. This was like my Italian mistress. I was there with my wife, but I fell in love with this place, and I had no idea. And as I was walking around, drinking a cappuccino, listening to this guy tapping and making sandals just below me by hand, I was standing right here, right in that exact spot with Lisa. And the bus was calling. I had to get back on the bus. And as inspired as I was in that moment, I was also very sad. I was frustrated. I was a little angry. Because I knew that where I was in business at that point, even though I'd been in business for 10 years, my business was not giving me the kind of freedom to really enjoy this place the way I wanted. I had a couple hours. I wanted to spend a lot more time there. And so often when I find myself stuck in life, I turn to my curiosity, I turn to my imagination and my creativity. And in that moment, I stood next to Lisa right here, and I said to you, what if we came back here in 10 years and we spent a few weeks here? And what if at the end of those weeks, I turned to you and I said, you want to spend another few weeks here? I knew that if I could grow as a leader and I didn't have the articulation to say I was a transactional leader and I needed to become a different kind of leader, but that's really what I was saying. And because I did that, my entire life changed. So what's the one question everyone wants to know? Did you go back to Positano? Actually, we did in 2018. We went back because I wanted to make sure it wasn't a pipe dream. I wanted to make sure I actually loved this place. So we spent a few days there that time. But here's what I want you to know. We haven't gone back and spent those weeks in Positano yet. But we have spent weeks in Africa. We have spent weeks in Bali. We have spent weeks in Europe. I have sold that company. We moved to Atlanta. We have reinvented my whole life. I'm living that life of freedom. Maybe next summer we'll go back to Positano. We'll do it when it makes sense to us. The point is, instead of being in a place of resignation and stuck, I turned to creativity to solve a massive problem in my life. And it totally transformed the rest of my life from asking that one question. What if you want to spend a few more weeks here? But creativity it's hard to define, right? It's sort of shapeless, formless. There isn't a way to kind of put it in a box necessarily. But what I would say is if you really want to understand creativity, you first have to look at what are the things that are getting in the way of you having a creative mindset, right? There's been a tremendous amount of research done on how creativity is formed, how we think about creativity. And I'm going to propose that there are 3 things that science has shared and shaped with us that I've kind of honed in on that really helped me tap into that. First is our brain's ability to reduce things and collapse things into smaller options. Our educational conditioning, and finally, our executive brain bias. So let's dive into each one of these. Who can read that? Everyone can, right? That's why you're giggling, because it doesn't make any sense that you should be able to read that. As long as the first letter and the last letter of any word are in the right order, all the other letters can be scrambled. Because our brain doesn't read the letters. We read each word as an object, as an icon, and we make up the rest. We fill in the blanks. That's what we're doing all the time. If I asked you in the beginning, draw me an eye, which one do you think you would have drawn? If I asked you to draw a tree, which one do you think you would have drawn? See, this goes way back to our hunter-gatherer survival days. In those days, what we needed to know was, is there a cheetah in the tree? Is there a bear in the tree? That's what we needed to know. Not how many leaves are on the tree and what color are they and how many branches and stems are there. The only thing that mattered was the most important thing. And so our brain got really good at reducing all of the other detail and all the other options into very simple things so that we didn't have to spend so many calories and we could figure out whether we needed to run from that tree or not. I say grandmother. You imagine this vibrant, beautiful woman? Probably not. So it's not just the objects in life, it's the people, it's the ideas. What we're constantly doing is filtering out many, many options. And if you want to really understand creativity, you've got to have a lot of options. In fact, if you want to feel lucky, have a lot of options in your life. Second, education. So in the 1960s, late 1960s, NASA was working really hard to get to the moon and back. They were solving problems all the time and finding new ones all the time. But they were struggling. They needed to get even better at this. And so they brought in George Land and they did a study of all 1,500 NASA scientists and engineers to figure out how do they score as a peak creative, as a genius level creative. So George said, well, as a baseline, let's also test 5-year-olds. So 5-year-olds, 98% of 5-year-olds, 1,500 different 5-year-olds, were genius creative minds. The NASA scientists and engineers, 2%. 2% passed the same test. And these are like, problem-solving rocket science guys and ladies. And they really were like, why is there such a massive gap here? So they went further. They looked at 10-year-olds and 15-year-olds. By 10 years old, only 30% of kids are passing at a genius level. By 15, it's only 12%. What we learned from this is that creativity is not a learned skill. We have unlearned. We all just forgot how to be creative. Every kindergartner is a creative genius. Last thing is, moving from the 60s, a lot of research has been done into brain science. Neuroscience has advanced significantly. And what we've come to realize is there isn't like a little creative lobe over here on the right side of the brain. That's an old myth. Creativity happens because all three of these core networks of our brain work together in collaboration with each other. Our imagination network, our executive control network, and the attention network. These networks of neural pathways work together to develop and bring ideas to life. But what's happened is because of all that dominance about the educational conditioning for memorization and structure and repetition and productivity, our whole school system is engineered primarily for productivity. It has come at the cost of our imagination. That's why there's a 98% gap between adults and children on their creative. And so a simpler way to think about this is if your ideas, if you were just spending all of our time in our imagination, we'd just be daydreaming all day long, nothing would ever get done. And that's fine, some people do that. But we do need to get stuff done, right? And so this is how we sort of brute force our way through problem solving. But we don't really spend enough time on the idea side. But if you actually want to know where art comes from, art is the ability to recognize an idea and then have the skills to bring it to life. How we pay attention to a good idea that we know that we can execute on. That's art. So how do we reintroduce all of you to the creative genius within? Well, here's the first clue. And Gene talked about this a little bit. Creativity isn't a skill. The World Economic Forum got that a little bit wrong. Creativity is a mindset. We don't do creative, we be creative. It is an active thing that we do. So the first thing we need to do is we need to exercise that imagination. We've been exercising the skill side for decades, all of us. We need to exercise the imagination side. So how do you do that? Do things that are creative, that spark and get you in the mood to be creative. And you need to do this all the time. So cook a meal without a recipe, work on a puzzle, brainstorm with others, meditate, do something, watch someone else do creative work. Do things that you're likely to fail at. Those are all ways that you can get your brain prepared to be creative. The second thing is you got to do something creative every day. But now you need to trigger your curiosity. So ask yourself when you're stuck, what if? What if I, what if we, or what if we did this? Don't stop at the first idea. So how many people actually had more than one idea before they started drawing? Or did you do the first idea you had and ran with it? So you need to open up options. Give yourself the ability to explore before you do the work. Give yourself more options. And finally, play fearlessly. When you finally are doing your options and you're in the mood, then you gotta let it rip. And no one has ever said it better, in my opinion, than John Cleese from Monty Python.
Nothing will stop you being creative so effectively as the fear of making a mistake. Now, if you think about play, you'll see why. True play is experiment. What happens if I do this? What would happen if we did that? What if?
We have to get into a state of play. When we're playing, there are no mistakes. We're just having fun. And that's what the practice and giving ourselves the option and then letting it rip and not worrying about how it turns out is the key to creativity. That is a creative mindset. One of my other favorite quotes around creativity is one of my favorite people ever, Albert Einstein. He said, creativity is just intelligence having fun. This was a patent clerk sitting in an office reimagining the way the entire universe operated in his head. That's creativity and imagination. He valued that way more than he did the science and the knowledge. So here, once again, we're going to give ourselves permission to play. So I would like you to now take that other card, turn it over, and we will get started again. Only this time, think about some ideas before you start drawing. Don't worry about making a mistake. Have some fun with this. And here we go. Explore. Use the whole sheet of paper. Use the other side, sure. What if you didn't worry about showing your neighbor? What if you looked at your neighbor's work? There aren't any rules to this. It's just about having fun. What if you had even more time? You know, there's a reason we're using crayons for this exercise instead of pencils. Be a 5-year-old again. Play like a 5-year-old. You're not going to be good at drawing this unless you're already an artist. Right? Actually, artists struggle with this more than most. So don't worry about whether you're an artist or not. You don't have those skills. In fact, keep going. No one said you only had 60 seconds for this. I didn't say you had 60 seconds for this, so keep going. Keep exploring. Maybe start over. Because, oh, I love it. You guys are really good at this. All right. Let's put those crayons down now. Was that a little different from the first time?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. I can feel a different reaction in the room. I don't know if everybody else can. But there's an energy in the room that wasn't there 15 minutes ago. So thank you for leaning in and playing with me on this. So I'll just close with this. What if every day you practiced being just curious enough to play fearlessly with yourself and those around you? have a sense of play and let it rip. Because what if you were already and always have been problem-solving Picassos? Thank you all very, very much.